ISE 2026 is now open.
Greetings to you all! While browsing YouTube, I often come across very catching video titles claiming that this or that is the Endgame Projector. These are very bold statements, but are they necessarily true? That is exactly why at the Integrated Systems Europe 2026 in Barcelona I met with Dr. Julian Scott to discuss if this machine can truly earn the title of an Endgame Projector. So let's get started, and I'm sure you will enjoy this interview. Hi Julian, thank you very much for coming, and I met you yesterday for the first time, but we had a great chat, and I think if we had more time we could chat even longer. Can you tell my viewers a little bit about yourself?
Of course, yeah. I actually got into loving cinema as a hobby, which is the best way to do it, you know. It was when my daughters were born and we couldn't get out to go to visit the cinema, etc. I thought I'd buy a projector and put a screen up in my front room. Looking back, it was terrible, but I was suddenly, you know, I was smitten with this big projected image, and I thought this is the way to go. So it's carried on ever since then. The opportunity came in 2011 to take my passion into a profession, and that's when THX came to London to do video calibration training, and that's how I got into the industry. So I was a professional video calibrator from 2011 up until I joined a distributor in the UK called Habitech. That was 19 months ago. I also was and still am a video calibration instructor with THX and now with the Professional Video Alliance. We have a lot of post-production people who come on our courses. In fact, we've got one just straight after ISE's over at Moonlight Studios here in Barcelona, where we'll be teaching calibration. So video is just part of my blood. Cinema's part of my blood. I've worked in post-production studios over the years, calibrated on set with TV and film, and also in residential context with custom installers, and also for private individuals who've bought a great new projector and they want it set up properly. So, and veered into the audio side as well.
Yeah, that's quite an impressive portfolio.
Yeah.
And one of the brands that you represent is Christie.
Absolutely, love it.
And I would like to speak a little bit about their products, and of course I'm just dreading to know about the flagship projector.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that drew me to Habitech to work for them is they distribute, or we distribute, I can say that now, we distribute products that I particularly love, one of which was JVC. So in the home theatre market, JVC is renowned for its great native contrast, you know, up to 150,000 to 1 on the NZ900, brilliant. But for bigger screens, for more brightness, Christie is where you need to go, in my opinion. And so they have this historical pedigree with cinema. You know, mentioned Christie, they're one of the big three in commercial cinema, and it just evokes cinema, which is my passion, what I love. Ultimately, we can talk about projectors and brands. Yeah. It comes down to films, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
It comes down to that. That's what it's all about, and being able to deliver director's intent. And I just feel that Christie is, you know, perhaps the best at doing that. That's why we love Christie, but they have this super uber greatest projector ever made,
which we're gonna talk about in a second. Yeah. So probably the cinema professionals definitely know Christie, but they also have the lineup of products aimed at the residential market. So I guess it's starts from junior models and
at the minute they have the 4K 860 IS, which is a very bright projector. I think it's about 7,000 lumens from memory. So that's going to fit into different spaces. If you want a bright image, it's quite punchy in terms of its image. But it's when we get to the higher priced options, which are relatively lower priced compared to the competitors, but they're higher priced, which we're going to fill in much larger screens because your average home cinema projector just doesn't have that kind of output from them.
I think like average consumer been spoiled with all the LED panels, with the HDR colors, to achieve true HDR in a projected image, that's quite a challenge, because it's lots of factors involved, including the room itself, not only the projector, but Christie has that.
Well, there's quite a challenge nowadays, isn't there, from flat panels, from LED video walls. You know, they're very bright, you know, they're very colorful, but are they cinematic? And, you know, I've told you about my love for cinema, and for me, cinema, if you mention that, it evokes a projector. And maybe because we're just older, you know, and we grew up with that, and the nostalgic image of, you know, maybe cigarette smoke rising through the light, and the light,
and the little rattle of the projector sound in the background.
You know, I remember my first experience in this when I was 8 years old. It was Jaws. I've never gone in the water again. You know, it really freaked me out. But that's, for me, cinema's projection, and there is a role for LED walls. You know, we'll see what that becomes. But right here now, for me, as a medium, projection is cinematic, and that's what I love. Christie, because they have such a pedigree in commercial cinema, and they can bring that into your home.
So, Christie Eclipse.
The Eclipse, the very best.
The very best,
in my opinion.
And if you can tell why it's the best, what technology is used inside of it to achieve that result.
But I don't know whether you're like me, but when I go to the commercial cinema to watch a movie, which doesn't happen very often nowadays, because I've got a great setup at home, I always find myself frustrated, because in most parts the image looks great, but the key thing for me is black level. And contrast, which is where DLP as a technology has struggled. It's its Achilles heel. So it's got great ANSI contrast, so those mixed scenes can really pop. You know, with a P3 color space, you know, you get that nice saturation and depth of color, nice color volume. But as soon as you enter those dark scenes, and we're thinking about movie genres like, you know, sci-fi, where you've got black space, you know, with stars dotted in there, or horror where you've got dark scenes, or maybe war or whatever. Certain sort of movie genres really depend upon that deep dark black. And the problem with DLP has been that it can't replicate that. So typically your best commercial cinemas projectors will be delivering a maximum of something like 5,000–6,000 native contrast, which actually is quite a lot lower than your average home cinema projector, like a JVC can do 150,000 to 1. So deep dark blacks in the home, but you go to the commercial cinema and it's sort of a light grey. And so those scenes frustrate me. But what if you could have a projector that would give you an OLED image on a huge scale and it's projected? That's, for me, cinema nirvana. You know, I got to see that at the Christie Eclipse launch late last year. It was just eye-watering. It was such a good image. It literally is a huge OLED image on a huge projection screen. You're getting zero black from those pixels, and you can have next to it a pixel which is lit up to peak output at the same time. So you're literally getting that sort of those specular highlights on a pixel level, which is what you get with an OLED display. To achieve that, though, requires enormous innovation, which is what they've done at Christie to deliver this. And I believe I've been told this was a no holds barred project. Just make the best projector. Doesn't matter what the cost is, just make it, which they've gone and done.
And your story and the feelings that you described, it's almost identical what I felt when for the first time I went to Dolby Cinema.
Yes.
Because Dolby Cinema uses the Eclipse.
It's a modified Eclipse, but it's the same projector fundamentally.
Yeah, because when the background completely disappeared, it was, And also, if we talk about the Odeon Lux Leicester Square Dolby Cinema, they have a flat screen aspect ratio. But there is no taps, so the aspect ratio can jump from scope into the flat, and you still don't see those bars. Because the contrast is so
ridiculously high. So it's it is, for me, it's the perfect projection system. Of course, you have to pay attention to the room design as a result, because as soon as you put content on the screen, you have light reflecting. to get the best out of to deliver that zero level with mixed content, you'll need an absolute back cave. Nothing to reflect light back onto the screen again. So you have to be careful in terms of your cinema construction, so you can keep delivering those zero blacks with mixed content.
So that's why the room is so important. And
it is absolutely. The room is a video component.
Yeah.
Just as it is with the audio, it's a video component. So you must pay attention to the room design in order to be able to achieve maximum contrast, which is critical with the Eclipse because the fractions of black are so fine. And it's not just the fact that it delivers zero black, it delivers the steps correctly out of black. So you're talking about gamma.
Yep.
So you can deliver gamma with absolute precision, whereas with other projectors, because the black floor is raised, the shadow detail also has to be raised as well. So you're compressing the dynamic range of your image. So this is one of the frustrations with DLP as it usually is delivered. So DLP as a technology, I'm going to be very rough about this. It's based on mirrors. You can tilt a mirror into an on, which is a reflective position, or an off position, but it's never truly off. So usually the imaging chip gets the light hits a mirror, which is a pixel.
Yep.
And if you want that pixel to be dark or off, you tilt it. It can never be truly off, so that light is reflected into a light dump. But because that's done after the imaging is being done, there's always still stray light floating around. So you get this light contamination. So this is why we have this frustration with the black level on a DLP projector in terms of the native black floor. The technology doesn't let you do that. But what they've done with the Christie Eclipse, they've made it 6 DMD chip projector. So you have that light dump happening before it gets to the imaging chips. So the imaging chips never need to do any light dump themselves. So it's basically you can then you can deliver zero black on a pixel basis by that means. So doubling the chips up means you can actually deliver that pixel level black. That's the secret sauce of the Eclipse.
Yeah, I was just about to ask.
Yeah.
So can we just go a little bit in steps? We have a light source, which is RGB laser.
RGB laser.
Yeah. So then it goes, as I understand, into the prism, which splits it by color, if I understand correctly.
Well, you've got three chips, one for red, green, and blue, and then doubling up with the imaging chips, which are red, green, and blue as well. So the whole light handling is done with the first one. So it's dumped. The light is dumped. If you don't need that light, you dump it before it hits the imaging chip, rather than afterwards, which is kind of too late.
Okay.
Which is what you'll have in a typical 3-chip or a single-chip DLP. So it's the 6-chip component, which is in a way very similar. If you're familiar with the BVMX310 Sony grading monitor, which is a dual LCD setup, it's a similar kind of thought process to how that works, which also delivering through a transmissive LCD panel can deliver zero level black on a pixel level basis. So it's a similar concept to that.
Okay, so basically you have a light source, then it goes into the 3 separate DMD chips,
Correct,
which are reducing the level of light
Correct.
where it's not needed.
Exactly.
And only then it's
then sent forth to the imaging.
Yeah, and after it's all the 3 colors are summed up.
Yeah.
And they go for the lens.
Correct.
Is that correct? Yeah.
Absolutely. In a nutshell, that's how it is, and that's what that differentiates it from a typical 3-chip or a single-chip DLP. That's why it's the best projector that I've ever seen, and I can't think of any more that we could do. If you've got infinite contrast on a pixel level, that's nirvana.
And what about the color?
So it does 98% of Rec 2020. Whether you'll need that or not is questionable, given that everything's being graded to P3. So even in a home situation, and let's remember, this is not a commercial projector, this is a residential projector. Yeah. So it has no ability to add an IMB because that's Dolby technology. So it is a purely residential projector for people with lots of money who want the very, very best. It comes in a 30,000 lumen variant, which is going to be enough for pretty much most large home cinema, private cinema experiences. So that also depends on the gain of the screen, and also it comes with lens options. So you have high brightness lenses, which are going to deliver more output, and you have an ultra high contrast lens options, which are going to remove around about 30% of your light output, which will give you even higher contrast. So you have plenty of throw ratio options there and also contrast options. But even with the high brightness lens, it delivers more than enough contrast.
You mentioned the screen, so is there any special requirements for the screen fabric?
I think, obviously one of the dangers with RGB lasers is laser speckle, when nobody wants to see that sort of dancing light show from the speckle hitting the screen. So a woven screen is usually best. It's a negative gain kind of screen. It's best in any cinema environment anyway, because you want the speakers behind.
Yeah.
Where the action's going to be taking place. So having a woven screen with a negative gain is going to counteract that sort of laser speckle as well.
But basically with such an amazing projector, it's just not enough just to buy it and install it. I think there is one crucial step that's which is calibration.
Absolutely, and that's the case everywhere, whatever display. Particularly projectors though, because projectors, even if it were perfect from the factory, which they're not, they are affected by the environment. Screen material is going to have different color temperatures, which needs to be taken account of. You also have sort of, this is not so much the case with the Eclipse, but projectors will, even lasers will fade over time. Most laser projectors will probably have a half-life of 20,000 hours, so the laser's degrading. That's not the case with the Eclipse. The Eclipse, if you run it on 100%, at 50,000 hours, it's still 100% brightness. So it's being built for longevity, which is great because, you spend a lot of money on a projector. You don't want to have to sort of trash it after, 50,000 hours. So it's going to last. So it should hold its calibration for a very long time. But you need to take into account environment. So ideal is black, all of that kind of stuff. Ideal is black, but the interior designers will design a screen, rooms with different colors, etc. But ideally, it's going to be in a zero black, and you're going to be able to sort of preserve that contrast on screen as a result.
That's why I'm stunned when sometimes I see like a cinema with red seats.
Yeah, and things like, but this goes beyond actually the image itself. But if you have things in your view, like posters, cinema posters, buying glass, it's going to be reflective of the light coming off. And all of these things are exit door moments. So we all know that experience when you're in this commercial cinema and you're watching your movie, and then in the bottom right-hand corner of your vision is a big exit sign in neon green. And I've been in some of those cinemas where that green is sort of spread onto the actual, the green color cast on the corners of the image itself. So if you are lucky enough to be able to afford a Christie Eclipse, you can do all of this properly. And one of my frustrations is, visiting a commercial cinema, it's like, when are the lights going to turn off? You can't realize the native contrast of your projector or the anti-contrast because there's so much light leakage, there's so much light pollution within the cinema. In a residential context, you absolutely have control of all of these things. So you can deliver the best picture possible in a residential situation. The Eclipse is built for that.
Yeah. It's almost like a unicorn, the Eclipse, because I think it's only one in Europe at this moment. So please, you have my email. If there is someone somewhere on display, and I would love to come in and see it in person and cover that on my channel.
Yeah, well, we very much hope at Habitech in the UK to be able to at least host the Christie Eclipse from time to time. So we're talking with our partners, Christie, about being able to do that. It's not something you can put in your briefcase. It's a big unit. Although it's much reduced from previous generations in terms of size. There's just a separate chiller unit, which is the size of a home portable air conditioning unit, and it's attached by a hose just for the cooling side of things. So, but it's a big unit. We hope to be able to host it at our offices in our special theatre there. Yes, it's a unicorn product, but Christie got something very special coming for the rest of us.
For all the mortals?
For the mortal, it's still, relatively speaking, it's still, expensive stuff. But there's something called VDR. People are referring to it as Vader. Everything has to be,
Darth Vader.
Everything has to be like that in Star Wars. But it stands for variable dynamic range.
Oh, okay.
And this has been demoed around in CinemaCons and different expos in the last year or so. And it's going to be available to most of the Christie cinema range. So it's coming to the CP ranges, so the existing CP ranges, and also these new projectors, which have just been announced, which should be available quite soon. Here at the show at ISE, there's a CP4420M-RGBH on display. It's not actually running, but you can see the size of it. You can look at it. It's a chunky unit, smaller than the Christie Griffin,
Yep.
but it's still a chunky unit. And they are 15,000 and 20,000 lumen options, natively 4K 4096 by 2160. They're also intriguing. They're DCI capable projectors, so you can add an IMB to those. You know, where you get your DCI content is another question, but for post-production studios, they'd be ideal. And they have ultra-high contrast lens options, so 6,000 to 1 is a possibility. But VDR potentially doubles, quadruples that native contrast. So you could achieve up to 60,000 to 1 native contrast from one of those. So not Christie Eclipse levels of black, but certainly JVC levels of black, which is, you know, for me, I'm satisfied by that. And I can watch my sci-fi movies and the blacks are deep, dark, and you get this nice specular highlights in the midst of that with stars and things like that. So with VDR, your more normal Christie projectors with this upgrade is capable of giving you much, much better black floor, native contrast, which satisfies most of us. So maybe you don't need a Christie Eclipse after all. Maybe that's what we need, and maybe that's enough for most of us.
That's quite impressive, and I'm looking forward to visiting the Christie booth and seeing those projectors in person. It was an amazing conversation. Thank you very much for coming, and I'm really looking forward for the news about the Eclipse at Habitech.
Yeah, come and see it.
Yeah, I would be more than happy.
Great. Okay, thank you.